Good evening and welcome to the first presentation in our Personalizing History series, African American Genealogy Challenges, What You Need to Know. We're so glad you could join us this evening. I'm Dory Gottschalk Fielding, the Seymour Library's History Discovery Center Coordinator. And we have as our special guest tonight, Dr. Shelley Viola Murphy. Our Personalizing History series is made possible through a Humanities Grant for Libraries. American Rescue Plan Humanities Grants for Libraries are an initiative of the American Library Association, made possible with funding from the National Endowment for the Humanities through the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. We have a smaller number of participants tonight, so it might be easier to open the audio for the question and answer session at the end of the presentation. So you can just ask your questions rather than having to type them into the chat box. We're recording the session tonight so that we can show it to others later. So in just a moment, I'm going to launch a quick survey on your screen before we start to ask everyone if you're okay with us turning on your audio at the end so that you could ask questions rather than doing the chat box. But feel free throughout the presentation to put things in the chat box. As I was saying, I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll here to see if everyone is willing if we turn on the audio at the end of the presentation tonight to ask questions. You're always free to put questions in the chat box as we go along through the presentation tonight, but we thought since we have a smaller number of people, it might be nicer and a little more personal to have the audio on at the end. So if you want to ask your question that way, you can as well. So just going to see if everyone is okay with that. Okay, so it looks like we will turn on the audio at the end. Everyone who is here at the moment said that they are okay with that. We are so pleased to have Dr. Murphy with us tonight. Dr. Murphy, also known as Family Tree Girl, has been an avid genealogist for over 30 years. She was born and raised in Michigan and now lives in Central Virginia. She conducts genealogy workshops at local, state, and national conferences. Dr. Murphy is known for her inspiring and interactive So What method with genealogical research, along with interesting problem-solving methodology such as the use of timelines. She serves on the boards of the University of Virginia and the Albemarle, Charlottesville, and Fluvanna Historical Societies. She is the president, coordinator, and instructor at the Midwest African American Genealogical Institute and develops staff and public educational programs for the Center for Family History at the International African American Museum, which opens this fall. She holds membership in the AAHGS, the NGS, APG, as well as the Daughters of the American Revolution and local genealogy groups. She's currently working for the University of Virginia as the Descendant Project researcher, seeking descendants of the enslaved laborers who built the university. She's also been an adjunct professor at Everett University since 2009. Dr. Murphy's personal research focuses on Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Virginia, West Virginia, South Carolina, and Tennessee. Dr. Murphy, I will now turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you. I guess I need to add New York on that list too, don't I? We were just talking about that. And welcome everyone. Going to share my screen. Is that looking okay there? Okay. Well, welcome to African American Genealogy Challenges, What You Need to Know. And again, my name is Shelley Murphy. So what we're going to do is take a peek at the challenges that you're going to face if you're conducting African American genealogy. And also, I want to run through some basics. These basics are really critical for people to understand. It doesn't matter if you're doing just African American genealogy or if you're doing European or whatever it is. You want to make sure you have the basics down. I'm going to talk to you about just saying yes, and we'll have a little bit of interaction. And then I'm going to share with you 15 steps that are some methods and strategies to help you combat some of the challenges that I'll be talking about. And then we'll recap, and then we'll open up for the Q&A. So also I want to share about the myths that are out about conducting African American research, that individuals are not able to find their African American ancestors prior to 1870. You also have the slave era tips and methods for research. Realize that free people of color didn't have it much better than those that were enslaved. Humans were considered property. You got to realize where the records are. Descendants of the slave owners, some are quite quiet for various reasons. Yes, there's times when you're doing this type of research, you're going to hit violence, more violence, and some unbelievable violence that it's hard for us in the 21st century to understand something that happened over 200 years ago. And of course, there's going to be emotional times. And understand that if you're African American and you descend from free or enslaved, you are the evidence that your ancestors survived this time frame in American history. So, genealogypox, do you have it? It is a disease that anyone that's doing this type of work has come across. It's tough. We're going to be obsessed. And once we get started in this kind of research, we don't stop. We just keep going. We hear the witnesses, we hear the whispers. We're looking for people continually. So here's some common challenges. Records are not recorded or destroyed. And this is common, again, not just African American. There'll be reasons why you have to look alternate places for records that include African Americans. And I'll be covering a little bit of all of that. There's people that know the information and they're just not going to share it. It's going to go to the grave with them. Sometimes we cause our own challenges because we only do online research and we don't go local. Surnames change for various reasons. A lot of times we're going to run against obstacles because we don't know what records or resources are out there. We don't know what we have when we're looking at documents and things because we didn't conduct an analysis on it. We received information that could be questionable. We have to consider, do we really have a brick wall challenge, or is it something because us as the researcher or the family historian is lacking? If you're doing slave era research, sometimes people were sold, a lot of times actually, and they might be pretty much lost forever unless you dabble into the DNA. And again, maybe you didn't set up some plan for your research. And again, not focusing at the local level or the local community that you're researching. And then a big obstacle and a challenge is taking our 21st century thinking and trying to go back to the 19th century or the 17th or whatever and try to make sense of it. It's really about gathering information. So records and resources that you might not find for African Americans. And again, it could totally just depend on what time frame you're looking to know where they're going to be at. So first thing you have to think about is, why are the records not there? Well, number one, remember, African Americans in this country that were enslaved were not viewed as human people. They were viewed as property. So you might not find regular vital statistics like we find now. There might not be public records unless you're looking at wills, deeds, tax lists of the slaveholder and looking at their personal property list where they're listing their property. There might not be media records such as our normal newspaper obituaries and funeral notices. And then there might not be military records typically that we would find more into the 20th century. Headstones and cemetery records might not be there also, depending on that slaveholder family and when you're researching, is there a slave burial ground on a plantation? Until you get there, you won't know. If not, it just could be an area. So, challenges in brick walls. My theory is just say yes. You're going to have them. Yes, there's going to be records that are not going to be in the same place you find other records. Yes, we know about burned counties, especially during the Civil War time. Yes, you're going to have to research a white family as well. If you're researching an African-American family and you're coming through the slave era time, especially in those throughout the 1800s, you're going to have to research both. Yes, you're going to encounter individuals that might have fear of what you find. A lot of times, some people are uncomfortable when you're researching a family if they knew their family or their ancestors enslaved individuals. Yes, we're always going to have challenges in brick walls. That's just part of doing genealogical research. And yes, there's going to be some that we can't resolve. So it's okay for us to have challenges in brick walls. So let's just move on. Just say, yes, they're there. Okay. And let's just keep going and let's not hold us back because we're going to face challenges. So know the 3 E's for the challenges. Expect them, embrace them, and enhance your research skills by trying to work on them. And again, positive attitude keeps us thinking one way and not being bogged down because we all have the brick walls and on probably more than one on the same person or the same area, same family. And so again, just expect them because they're coming. Embrace them. That means it's okay. I got them. That just means I'm going to have to do a little bit more research. And again, make the brick walls or your challenges for any of your genealogical research. Just say it's enhancing your skills and then we move on. So let's get to some of these basics, okay? And I'm saying just stick to the basics. Why do I say that? Because there's no magic when you're doing this genealogical research. It is not just going to fly in our laps. We're going to have to conduct a reasonable search in order to find things. So here comes my steps. Step 1, understanding African-American research. It's American history. It's not just African-American or Black history. It is American history that happened in America. Slavery equals economics. People were property. That means when you're looking for enslaved folks, they're going to be in the property records where the equipment and the animals and so forth are. They're not going to be where we typically find what we know of right now. There was buying, selling, and renting of African Americans. And African Americans, I am labeling those that are born in this country. And again, I mentioned about some being sold deep south. There were also mortgages put on people. People were used to pay down debts. There were free people of color that were not enslaved or that became free people of color. Some participated in the military quite a lot. Revolutionary War, just as an example, there's almost 7,000 people of color and African Americans and American Indians that participated in the Revolutionary War. Not a lot is talked about them. And so again, that awareness, at least you know they're there. Civil War, of course, we have over 200,000 African Americans that participated on the Union side, I'll say it that way. You got the Freedmen Bureau records, which is critical to African American research, and I'll go through that. And then we'll talk a little bit about 1870 census and freedom. Got to get organized. This is step 2, because if not, we're going to be laying there just like Kermit and be overwhelmed. And we're going to keep researching things that we have done before and again and again. So we don't want you to become successful in just collecting paper. You need to know what you're collecting and make sure you have a system for how you're going to file it, save it, and then retrieve it. So make a decision now, as you know, being a researcher, on how you're going to maintain your files, because you want to have this ready for whoever comes behind you or whoever is going to take over for you. So it's your choice: filing cabinet, binders, folders, or stacks. Step 3 is that you basically have to set a goal. What do you want to know about your ancestor? Everything I'm going through in these steps are critical for dealing with challenges, and especially challenges with African American research. So consider these as methods and strategies of things that you need to do to help combat this, you know, the challenges that you're going to face. So again, you want to set realistic goals. You don't want to just say, I want to know everything about the Murphy family. That's not realistic. What you want to do is break up the goals into little parts or little sections or little steps, and then go for them after that. Give yourself a nice reward when you resolve something, you know, and keep your experience a good, positive with success. Think about whoever has done research in your family already, and have you considered the time that's involved? I do this basically 7 days a week now, and there's a cost to this type of research as well. Do you belong to Ancestry? That's a paid site. Family Search is a free site. So think about all the ins and outs that you're going to have to do, but you want your goal to be realistic. You want to consider how you're organizing your research, because you want it easy and you want access. Just like we have a overwhelming access right now, number one, because of COVID. There's lots of webinars and seminars that are going on, lots of institutes that are out there right now. So we pretty much have unbelievable amount of information at our disposal. Step 4, got to think about the research. It starts just like anybody else's. Doesn't matter if you're white, Black, American, Indian. You know, you start off with what you know. Yes, I know people say start with yourself. It doesn't matter. Start with whoever you know about and then build from there. So again, start your research for your ancestor with what you know about them, and then think about what you don't know. And then you want to think about who, as in an individual, or what, as in a document, would know the information. And you'll see a little bit more of this in a minute. One of my Murphy's rule is number 1 is don't jump outside the box. Stay inside the box. And I know that's going to counteract everything that you've probably been told, but I want you to stay inside the box and conduct deeper research and analysis. Step 5 is Murphy's rule to follow. Again, here's your basics. African American research especially, but also this could be for your European ancestors as well. Follow the money, the land, the water, the community, and the faith of the people. And remember, there's no magic here. Each one of those in this step or these rules are telling you where records are at. So think of that. Look in money, land. The water has to deal with migrations. You got to know the local community. And the first time you come into a new county or a new area, find the church, find the courthouse, and find the cemeteries. So let's go through some combating ways, okay? And looking at how we can help ourselves not get so frustrated. So this is my theory. I say this all the time. Genealogy or genealogical research is about time, place, and asking questions. When I'm researching an ancestor, African American or European, what time frame am I in? What's the location? And then I'm going to start asking questions, because asking questions is what I don't know. And that's what I want to find. So we can't complain pretty much about our researching, because this was the old Google. And some of you might remember those catalogs. They might still have them in libraries, some libraries. I know the Historical Society in Charlottesville, Virginia, has a cabinet that's got these drawers. And you know what? They're full of obituaries, because they have been connecting, obituaries, and they're just, some volunteer cut them up and put them in alphabetical order. And it started back in the 40s. It's a wonderful resource. But this was our old Google. California Genealogical Society gave me permission a few years ago that I could use this image here. They said the internet is just the tip of the iceberg. Most of your research is done in your libraries, your archives, and your courthouses. And again, it's the basics. We know there's no magic out there. So we want to make sure that you're going local. Where did your people live? Think of the 4 C's. If it's African Americans, are you looking during the time that they would have been enslaved? Are you looking at a time around the Civil War? Or is this before? Are you looking at the Revolutionary War? Sometimes you got to get off of the computer, and you're going to have to go into the 4 C's: courthouse, cemeteries, churches, and the communities. If you have an opportunity to walk the grounds of your ancestors, you'll have a whole different experience while you're doing research. Consider this also as ways on combating some of these challenges. Don't assume anything. Spelling doesn't count. With the Goen surname, I've got 12 different spellings. There's just a sample of some of them. And you're going to ask questions, and you're going to document. And you're also going to make some logical explanations for things. You don't assume everything is online. You can't just research the heads of the family. You want to research all of the children and all of the relatives as much as you can build out, but definitely research the children. And if you're missing information about the adults, might show up in one of those children or grandchildren's records. And don't assume that all African Americans have Native American roots. The DNA that's been, people that have been using are showing right now that it tends to be more European that they're looking at, and less Native American. The average African American has 25% European DNA. You want to be able to prove and support your evidence or your research. And again, chat with people who've done it before. Get yourself a genealogy buddy. It will help you in doing your research. You can run things by them, and they can run things by you, and you share information. So step 7 is know the identifiers. This is just a sample of a few of the ones that I have come across in my research. They're going to be coded, and you can think about census, or it could be in documents, it might just be abbreviations. But this is some of the ones that I have come across, not just for the work that I'm doing with the University of Virginia, but also within my own family. So look at that. You can see the abbreviation for colored, M for mulatto, B for black, free Negroes, or it might just be NEG. Just as a sample, you want to be able to identify, because if you see an abbreviation, you want to know what it means. So here's an example of showing those identifiers. There's a Virginia death certificate, and it says colored on there, okay, up in box number 4 on the left. And then on the other side is the 1860 census for Jefferson County, Virginia. And you can see a B for Black, and then scroll down and you see the M for mulattoes. So from census to census, these codes could change. So for European folks or white, you see the W. So other than that, you're going to see all these other identifiers, or I for Indian, C for Chinese. So here's step 8. This is the rule of 3. This is an excellent way that this James Dent Walker, he's the one that shared this at a talk. And what he said, that if you claim something, you need to be able to come up with 3 pieces of evidence or information to support the claim. So for example, if you say that Mary Goins Marsh is the mother of Clara Marsh, then ask yourself, what are the 3 or more documents or records or a piece of evidence that would show a mother-daughter relationship? I've listed 3, but think about it. You know, can you come up with some more? I said birth, death, and marriage right off the bat. Those are records that could support the evidence of a mother-daughter. Could be a father-son. This is the rule of 3, I'm calling it, from James Dent Walker. So again, think about if one of those records weren't available, can you come up with another record? And you're welcome to, you know, put it in the chat if you want, or when we talk, you know, open up the Q&A, come up with something else. But right now, think about the rule of 3. Great way to combat any kind of challenges that you might come up with. Step 9, records create records. Yes, they really do. So think about it. Once you get a death certificate, like on the left, and you think about it, somebody has passed on, what other records are created because this death certificate was created? And I've listed 5. There could be more. And again, if you'd like, you can add them in the chat box or we can discuss it. But think about it. You got a death certificate. What other records get created? An obituary record, a coroner's report, a cemetery record or a funeral record. Could be a record that's in the newspaper, or there could be a church record. And again, I want you to just think about this, because these are ways you combat challenges, especially even more with African-American research, because the records aren't always in the same place that the white records are at. Okay, so again, that was step 9. So here's another little source just to look at. This is actually a death record for a Goins, right? The race is a C for colored. He's male. You got the death date, right? So what other records, thinking about the previous slide, are created because this one was created, or what other records are supporting the information that's on here? First thing I do is think about the death date. Let me go see if he's on a mortality schedule. That's one record. Yes, get the death record if there is an actual death record, which during this time in 1874, it was just, you know, logged in a ledger. And of course, the cause of death. Was there anything else that I want to question? Are there any other medical records I might be able to find that could give more information? But look, I got father and mother's name. That means those 2 probably were married, right? So I'm going to go get another record. Now, the death record didn't create that, but that leads me to another record. And I now have a birthplace for the Goins person that passed in Loudoun County, Virginia. Where do I go? Loudoun County, Virginia. So you start looking for that surname and everything that's associated with it. Here's step 10. Where's the information? Where are the records at? Number one, think about the house repository. Yes, there's records, funeral homes and cemeteries, recorded property records, tax records. Remember, African Americans were property. They're going to be in inventories. They're being taxed. Historical societies, libraries, and archives, and of course, attics. Look for the plantations that are in that neighborhood or that county that you're researching. Who are they? And do they go from one census to another? Are the same neighbors? Especially if you don't know actually where the property is, then start tracking the neighbors along with your people. Plantation owners, is there anybody out there that has wrote an article about their family? So is there a list at the county office or the courthouse about plantation owners? Where did they pay their taxes? Where are the land records and deeds at? You don't know if the plantation owner descendants are also looking for records on them, on their family. So you want to seek out to find out if there's any descendants as well. And a simple Google, because Google's our friend, Google the surname and the location, see if there's any historical events that happen in that county that can help you get more information. So here's some other places, just looking at specifically African-American records, but again, it could be for anybody. You got your census, and talking about census, 1850 and 1860, there are slave schedules. They don't have names on them as far as the slave, but they have the slave holder or owner or overseer on that slave schedule. Now, there are 3 counties in the United States, and we just found a 4th county the other night, last Friday, that on the 1850 slave schedule, the enumerator by accident or intent put the names of the enslaved, because normally they are just gender, age, and their color. Pension records is another place. If you had a USCT, United States Colored Troop person, or anyone during the Revolutionary War, Civil War, whatever war, 1812, see if any of them identify people as a person of color. Of course, looking in Bible records, you got oral history that's coming down. Always doing slave era type research. You're going to find the slave owner's will or any bills of sale, information about their obituary, or their holdings. Check reference books, dissertations, family books that where the family, family historian wrote about their family. Again, the house repository includes your attics, your basements at grandma's house or auntie's house, under the bed, or those boxes you couldn't touch. And of course, you want to hit the 1870 census. 1870 census is step 11. Doing African-American research, will realize this is the first federal census that will list people of color on the census. Unless they were free prior to 1870, they were listed. If they were enslaved, they're not going to be in the federal census. And remember, census are not local. Census are a federal document, okay? And again, you want to pay attention to the columns and what information is there and what questions are being asked. For any federal census, population census, you can download the enumerations guide or their training guide that they were told what to do and how to do it. And then you download the questionnaire, and it'll tell you each one of these that are numbered, the 1 through whatever it is, 20, and what they're supposed to do and what's supposed to be there. So it's valuable to not only do it just for 1870, because it's also the first census after the Civil War. right? And because of name changes and opportunities that African Americans had, this is why it's going to be critical to make sure you get as much information, because you're probably going to do a little bit of toggling, maybe going to 1870, then going back, looking at a slave schedule, maybe going to 1870 to 1880, coming back and, oh, let me look in the Freedmen Bureau record, which I'll talk about in a couple minutes. So here's an example of 1870 federal population census. And this is a Michigan record, Manistee County, in the township of Pleasanton. So just to be able to see, you're getting name, age, sex, race, occupation, the real estate or personal. So if you see real estate or personal, that means there should be another record. And then, of course, you're seeing the birthplace, and then father and mother, birth and marriage, and so forth, right? So again, look at these census and understand the columns and reference what the questionnaire is and what the response is supposed to be and what the enumerator was supposed to do. Number 12. This is one of my favorites, and that's timeline. Let me make sure I didn't mess that up. Yeah, 11, 12. Timelines. This is just a Word document with a table. This is something that's really critical for the research that I do for the University of Virginia, because I am trying to find descendants of the enslaved laborers from 1817 to say 1870. So what did I do? I created this timeline to be able to set my goal. What's my hypothesis? But the biggest thing is to realize that I am recording everything I can find about the people in chronological order, which is going to include a date, name, age, event, be it birth, whatever it is. And one of the things I'm going to say about the name, doesn't matter if it's misspelled, put it the way it is on the document, because whoever comes behind you will not find it if you correct it. They need to find the way it's going to be logged on the document that's going to be in the database, if you're using Ancestry or whoever it is. Location, you want the county. Resource citation, put it in, make it a hyperlink, go ahead and stick it in there so this document is alive. Also check on any of the documents that you might have. Who was the informant? Who was the witnesses? You want to put their names, and then you think about it and say, well, wait, do they connect to my family? Or who are they? Are they descendants? Is this a child? Is this a daughter, son, whatever? And then in notes and columns question, what you're looking at is you're talking to yourself here. This is where all your questions come up. This is where you say, wait a minute, this doesn't add up. Something doesn't make sense. Maybe one census, and again, we're in chronological order on the left-hand side under date. And maybe from one census to another, instead of a 10-year age difference, now you're seeing a 20-year. What happened? Was there other records or some other resource that gives a different age than what's on the census? Most of the time, some of the information that is on the census is inaccurate because the enumerators, especially regarding African Americans, made a lot of assumptions. You want to tell yourself the date is completed to whatever you looked at, and then what are your next steps? Where do I go from there? So if I say, okay, I've got a marriage record and I found it, and now it says there's only 2 kids, and maybe I got to find another kid because there should be one that was, alive during this time. What is my next step to go find that? And then tell yourself to go do it. And you can swap those last 2 columns. This document changes every time I pick it up. I might add something different to it. When I use Word, I can add columns and I can add rows. I set my goal and whatever I'm thinking. I usually do this on either one family or one individual. It doesn't matter, but everything is going into one document. So you look at the date, you see the resource, and you think about the next step. That's the beginnings of your research plan. You can make whatever codes you want to do, like I did. I just made that up, but I use these documents or this document because it's simple and it's something I know I will do consistently. Now, some people use Excel instead of Word. I'm just used to using Word. You can put it in Excel, doesn't matter. It will help you resolve things that you have a brick wall on, and especially with African American. Or maybe it's a naming pattern. Maybe you've got more than one and you want to work that out. Well, you put it in a timeline type document or make yourself a chart and start charting this out and using that as a tool to help combat or to resolve something, combat a challenge or resolve something. So next step is so what? This is something that we use at the Midwest African American Genealogy Institute. All it is an analysis. I walk around those classrooms at the Institute when we're conducting the so what session, and they'll have a document with their ancestors on it. And maybe it's that death certificate. And I saw that the mother was listed, right? On the death certificate, the mother of the deceased. And her name was Sarah Roper Hart. So I'll say, well, so what? You got the mother's name. That's not uncommon. So what? What's next? Well, if you see the mother's name there and it's got something that looks like it's the maiden name, because that's what's supposed to be there, then start making the list of what you're going to do now that you have that information. So the so what is now what's next, and you're planning your research. Well, number one, I'm going to find a marriage record for the parents. Number two, this is a whole nother line because now I have the maiden name line to research to find information about. When did they get married? Is she alive, or is she already passed? And start gathering and building off of that. This method works when you're simply just saying, well, so what? I got this information. You're looking at a document. You need to question what's on there. And what's the value to you? What does it tell you that you need to do next? So think about, you went through, every record creates a record, right? You want to do a deeper analysis and stay in the box. So now you're in that box and you're saying, well, so what? I have this information. Why don't I have this information? And then again, what do I have to do to get additional? And you start lining that up in your timeline. And then you're telling yourself you did it. Step 14, good strategy to find your ancestors before 1870. Well, first, if they're African American, you got to determine if they're free or enslaved. And again, you're going to go back and forth through time. You're going to go with what you know, what you find, and try to slip in between. Remember, there's only two slave schedules, 1850 and 1860. There's no names. You're only going to find the slaveholder, and then you're going to have gender, age, and race for the enslaved population. You got to stay local. Think about, does that county you're researching have any registers of free Negroes or free people of color, cohabitation records where they made a list of everybody that was living together, right? Bill of sales. In Virginia, the state said in 1853, all the plantation owners needed to document the slave births. So from 1853 to, I think it's 1860 something, they all had to log the slave births of the people that they owned. So we get the mother's name, we get the baby's name, the date of the baby's birth, and what county that they're in. Gold mine information. And then again, you got the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. And this is where assistance was provided to thousands and thousands of impoverished whites or just whites and southern states, and people that were formerly enslaved, people that were free. And we'll go through that in an example. This is talking about the slave schedules. Just know that these are humans, and you're seeing a sample of one, a age, a male or female, and then they're coded with a B or M, or it could be an N. That's how that slave schedule is going to look at. This is the 1850 census with free people, so it's not the slave schedule. So you see the name, and which you don't see on the slave schedule. So just as an example, you see them as a mulatto. You see the M on that First Lady Mary Goins. Okay, now we're going to talk about my favorite collection in all research, and it's African Americans that this is really key for, but also any white ancestors you have. The Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, I just call it the Bureau or the Freedmen's Bureau, okay? It is federal. It is under the military. This basically created right at the end of the Civil War, and their job was to be like social services, a relief organization. That means they were helping with education, healthcare, food or rations, clothing, refugee camps, legitimizing marriages, labor contracts, and more. They also helped the Black soldiers collect any claims that they had towards a pension or back pay. It covers the years of 1865 to 1872. Mississippi, Louisiana, and one location in Virginia had pre-Bureau records, and they would start about 1863. Various records also included letters, complaints, hospitals, transportation. They had court hearings. This is all of what the Bureau is providing for people after the Civil War. So this is my favorite site, Mapping the Freedmen Bureau site, because you can also access the Bureau records on ancestry.com/Freedmen's, MEN. Family Search has it. They both have the 3.5 million records on their databases. And then Family Search also had Discover Freedmen. Discover Freedmen was another site, and that they added indexing more to a few other records that were put up later. So here's a labor contract, just to give you an example. Ephraim Smith is entering into a labor with Peyton Coles, and this is in Charlottesville. This is a sample of what's in the Freedmen Bureau. This record was created in 1866, and it says it's between Ephraim Smith of the first part, Peyton Coles of the second part. Ephraim Smith is going to work in Albemarle County. He's going to make X amount of money, and I'm going to provide him food and suitable food in quarters. Now, what is interesting is Ephraim Smith, who, of course, now the war is over, he's freed, but he was formerly enslaved by Tucker Coles, which is Peyton Coles' brother. 9 times out of 10, if you pull a labor contract, you might be looking at a former slaveholder and they're formerly enslaved. A little bit more research might have to be done, or it's going to be identified. This is one of the type of records that's in the Bureau. 9 times out of 10, the former slaveholder is hiring their formerly enslaved folks. Okay? So again, a gold mine for research in African Americans. Here's another sample of a record in the Freedmen Bureau, and it's a record of contracts and indentures made by binding out colored minor children, and this is in Fluvanna County. So I got the names of whites, I got the name of the colored, okay? And again, I'm in a location, remember the time and place, and asking questions. So I got a C.P. Sneed and I got a Philip Daintyfield. Daintyfield is colored. White is the Sneed. I'm going to first go hit slave schedule and find out either 1850 or 1860 and find out if there's a slaveholder in Fluvanna County with the last name Sneed. But I'm also going to check for the Daintyfield also. So this is a way you can use this record and use it as a source of leads. And again, your brick wall is the fact that you're trying to find out, did somebody receive assistance from the Freedmen's Bureau right after the Civil War? Here's another example of Freedmen's Bureau record for Louisa County. And I'm saying Virginia, it's a marriage record. So all of a sudden now I know this record was created in 1866. But what I'm getting is names, I'm getting ages, former spouses and children, occupation, and I have a location. Because in these records, they're identifying who the man is, their age, who the wife is, and their age, and what type of work that they did. But they recognize that maybe the husband had a former wife, and maybe they had children, and here's the children, and they're living. Or maybe the wife had a former spouse and had children. Gold mine information. You cannot believe that myth that's out there that African Americans cannot find their family prior to 1870. You're looking at a document right now that was created in 1866. Here's another record, and this one, it breaks my heart sometimes, and I look at this and I think about Miss Betsy, who's listed here. This is a Louisiana ration record. That means they're coming to get food assistance, okay? And so if you can see it, and sorry, it's an old record, so it's kind of blurry. But there's a couple 100-year-olds on this record. There's a 48-year-old, 84, and an 80. This record was created after the Civil War, and we're talking about something that's setting up at a field office in St. Landry Parish, Louisiana. So let's look where I got the arrow at. That's Betsy. Betsy's 100 years old, female, and you know what? That next column says name of former owner. Bingo. Now, this, of course, would be the last slave owner. Doesn't mean that Betsy didn't have more than one, during her lifetime. She's 100 years old. But think about this. These are the questions. If this was my ancestor, she's 100 years old. She probably lived her whole life enslaved. I got the name of her last slave owner, 1867. Think about when this lady was born. This record is 1867. This lady, Miss Betsy here, was born before this country was the United States of America. And if I was a possible descendant, she might be my first person to be born in this country if she wasn't born in Africa. There's a lot to peel out of just a list of somebody going and getting food and getting assistance. And of course, they have notes over here as well. So if you're researching throughout the South using that mapping site, you go right into the state, to the county, and find out if any of your people are there or your slaveholder is there. So looking at an example right quick, finding Ned. Ned can also be Edward, and I'm looking for his descendants. I mentioned earlier about what I know. I knew that he was enslaved by William Craven from Albemarle County. I knew this man Ned was rented to UVA in 1860. So I've got a location and I've got a time. I knew Ned could also be an Edward because those names are interchangeable, just like Sally and Sarah, Suki and Sarah. He did not have a surname, so I wasn't sure if he was going to make it to the 1870 census, remember, which is the first census after the Civil War. So I needed to check to see if there is a Black man named Ned or Edward in Albemarle County in the 1870 census. I worked from a list which told me that he was rented to UVA, okay? And that's what you're seeing at the bottom. So I built a tree on William Craven. He's the slave owner. So I started looking and I thought, okay, there's William Craven and his daddy is John Huff Craven and so forth. Normal stuff. And again, I'm researching the white family just like I'm going to research the Black family. So here is a Maria Craven, right? Which is the mother of, let me see, here's the mother, and I'm showing you on the line of William Craven and a Ned Craven. Maria was enslaved by John Huff Craven. They had those two sons, a William and a Ned, AKA Edward. So I'm researching Maria's line and it's going backwards because you see where she is on the right. There's John Huff Craven, the slaveholder. There's her children. I was following Edward. He has a son named Thomas. He has a daughter named Lula Ann. My goal is to find descendants of the enslaved labor, Edward or Ned. And this is how I did it. Building the tree, gathering the records and the resources. Because in John Huff's will, he says in 1841, which is, again, the father of the two individuals, Ned and William, I bequeath to my beloved wife, Mary, and her heirs forever, my Negro woman, Maria, and her sons, Edward and William, together with all her future increase. Future increase is any babies that Maria has belong to the wife, okay? This is an example of slavery and how that wealth just keeps going, okay? And how they got passed around. But I've got the son's name. I know Edward is also my Ned. And again, another part, he identifies their value of Edward and William and also Maria. And he uses Ned when he evaluates, the state evaluates him at $450. Maria was $450, and so was William. So here's a sample of Edward Gowen's death certificate. He dies in 1877. And again, tracking back and just showing you the records of working through, for me, finding a descendant. Slave era research tips. You got to know the law. What was going on? You know, did the state require people of color to pay a fee if they came into the county? Were the records in that county that are emancipation records or manumission records? And that is about freeing a person from someone else. Are there slave narratives in your area? Family genealogical records. Are there any plantation records or any books? And if you hadn't heard about Edward Baugh's books, he tracked Edward Baugh's white, and he wrote about his family and the enslaved that they held. He had access to 10,000 different documents. Were there any city and county directories in the area that you're looking at? What about the public notices? Do you need to go to the courthouse or to the library or to the historical society? You want to look for things where the resources that you can see and where people have been successful, or they're telling you what they're not successful at, but these are the things that I have done or that was done. Okay, so you want to keep in mind that there's other places to keep your learning up. You want to use social media for doing your research. You want to put questions out there. You want people to give you back input. Listen to the things that are available. And I'm giving you examples of Blog Talk Radio, research at the National Archives and beyond. There's over 400 interviews and talks on Bernice Bennett's site. Genealogypox, Roots Revealed, Black Progen's got like 130 webinars out there. You got the legal genealogist. You can scroll through her topics and her research and look for questions that you might have, like what's a dower? What does that mean? Type thing. Go through, and it's Judy Russell is the legal genealogist. You got African Roots podcast, Dear Myrtle and Cousin Russ. And again, I'm listing some of the blogs. There's the link to Maggie, which is the Midwest African American Genealogy Institute, which they are the only one in the United States that focuses on African ancestry. You got GRIP and you got SLIG. GRIP is in Pennsylvania, SLIG is in Salt Lake City, Utah, and there's more. This is just an example of some of the blogs and things you can access. So, a recap of the ways to combat the challenges: learn about the local history, what was going on, and what resources are at the local level. You want to join and participate in any kind of genealogy group. If there's not one, then you start creating one. If you put it out there, people will come. You want to attend any trainings that you can get. And it doesn't matter if you're looking at African American or European American. You want to see, can the same thing happen in the area that you're researching? Keep it a record of your attendance of when you listen to these webinars and things like that. Make sure you keep a record of that. Maybe someday you'll go after getting some certification or something, and they might want a record of attendance. Please share your experiences, your blogs, your letters, or books or journals about your experience on researching. I was researching the Brand family in Albemarle County. They had rented 2 of the enslaved individuals to the University of Virginia. And you know what? It ended up being my family. So that was a total shock. Volunteer and join anything regarding the social media realm. If the county, the city or the county for the state that you're researching doesn't have a page up at Facebook, then you create one. They will come. And ask for help. Get your genealogy buddy. You can form a genealogy group at the library. Or maybe it's anybody that's there that's, say, research in Virginia. We've got ancestors in Virginia. Maybe 5 or 6 of you are all concentrating just on Virginia. Build your timelines. Use it as a tool to help combat those brick walls. Because you're putting things in chronological order, that means that if something is out of order, your brain is going to see it. Your eyes are going to catch it. Then you got to resolve that. Use the so what concept of asking questions when you're looking at a document. And always think, well, so what? I got this, but you know what? What's next? What can I get out of there? What questions do I have? So bringing all this together, we know America is not at peace with slavery and what has happened. We know there's sad and emotional times during that. We're seeing that right now. African American research might take a little bit longer in most cases because you got to find where the people were keeping the records at. If you're white and the descendants of a slaveholder, do not be afraid to share that information. Nobody's accusing you of doing anything or being anything. We just want information to help find our family, and you might have it, and vice versa. Tell your stories, share your stories, realize that all genealogy is going to have a brick wall and there are going to be challenges, and just keep asking questions and stick to the basics. And you can see Sir Winston Churchill's quote over here: a nation that forgets its past has no future. So I thank you, and I'm going to say good luck busting those walls, and know that know your roots, and that they're long and that they're strong. And then here is just some information on Maggie. If anyone is interested, we can entertain that with some questions, and I'll be glad to answer. And there's my contact information if anybody has any questions.
Okay,
And then I'm going to stop sharing. How's that? All right. Are you there, Dory?
Yes, and I've unmuted everyone, so if people want to ask questions, they should be able to.
Okay, great. Great. I'm open. I see one question in the question box. Oh, that was Judith had to leave. She had another Zoom meeting. That was her question.
I have a question. Adrian Jones Roderick.
Hi, Adrian.
Hi, how are you? It was a
I'm good.
very informative talk there. I have a question on a relative that I was looking to get a little bit more information. I'm wondering if the Freedmen Bureau would be able to help me. I know my great-great-grandmother, Anne Marie, died in Auburn, New York. We don't have an obituary on her. The last record I believe I've seen of her was in a newspaper article, I believe, because it mentioned her as being Mrs. Thomas Eliot. It was at a like a ball that they had in Auburn years ago, back in 1879. And from that article, I'm saying, okay, well, she was alive then. How is it that I'm not able to get an obituary? I know everybody didn't have obituaries back then, but I'm against a brick wall to find out what would be my next step. If I'm not able to get the obituary, would the Freedmen Bureau system be able to help me, get any other information on her?
Well, first I would ask the question, how do you know she died in Auburn, New York?
Okay. In Auburn, New York, because I know that my grandmother was also born in Auburn, New York. And my grandmother. I had my great-great-grandmother and my grandmother that are also from Auburn, New York.
So who told you that she died in Auburn, New York?
No one had told me that. I know she had her last child in Auburn, New York, and that's where I run up against a brick wall. And he died in 1880.
Okay, so regarding deaths,
Yes.
doesn't matter where you lived, wherever you died is where that record's going to be at, and it might not be where you lived. So
Okay.
I would stop just looking in Auburn, because I'm assuming you've exhausted a search looking in the Auburn area for a death record.
Yes.
And start looking at the counties surrounding Auburn.
Okay.
And because that's an assumption that she died there. She might not have. Find out where siblings of hers might have been. She could have been visiting somebody and died. And they might have just been in the next county. Because the record will have nothing to do with where they lived and only where they died.
Okay.
So I would start doing more of a general search and maybe just put New York and look at it that way. And I don't know if she's white or black, but you can switch up on the search using Ancestry. You can put her last name, and if she's got a little variety to the first name instead of something like Mary or Sarah, something very common, and just put that. And if they're black, or if they're white, and put a location, and then just put if they're black or white and nothing else.
Okay. All right.
And if she's African American or Indian or whatever, that's the only thing you want to check exact that. Was the last name or first name only, or just last name and black and a location.
Okay. All righty.
And
Thank
do
you.
random searches that way. And then also, if the last child is born there, look at the children's records. And if anything is going to record where the mother died, which possibly is there a will or any estate settlements from her. And then where are her siblings all at, and search those areas as well.
Okay. Alrighty. Thank you so much.
And if anyone else wants to add to that, they're welcome to, because, and again, just, it took me an adjustment to automatically go where they were born and where they lived, to always assume that's where they died. And that Lawson Goins I showed you, he lived in Jefferson County, born in Loudoun County, lived his whole life. And he was born in 1807, and he died in Clark County. None of his kids are in Clark County. He was visiting somebody and died there because he lived 30 miles away. And again, took me a few years before I found the death record. And it was in the next county. And it was like, well,
wow.
So lesson learned.
Yes.
Know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
Will you be sharing your PowerPoint, specifically that form that you use? And I wrote my notes and I can't remember the name of the form, but the form you use to kind of do your research.
I have the PowerPoint. Dory has the PowerPoint. I think. If
And
not, I'll send it to you.
The form is shared in the chat, so you should be able to find it there.
And if you open that document from Zoom, you have to save it. If not, when you close off, it goes away. So open it, PDF, and save it. And then you'll have it.
Thank you.
And it's just because it's transmitted through Zoom, that's all. The timeline is actually a really good exercise. And of course, I have total conversation with whoever the dead people are I'm researching and asking these questions. And I guess I'm entertaining myself during the research, and asking questions. And I do. A lot of it is talking out loud because I'm hearing it. And again, a couple of friends and I, we get on Zoom quite a lot, and we're each doing our own thing, and we're all talking the same stuff, or just, enjoying the company and not sitting and doing it by ourselves. And then again, having those conversations, now wait a minute, so-and-so, just like you talked about this grandmother. All right, where are you? Who were you going to go see? Who did you visit? Where are your babies at? Why aren't you here when you should have been over here? And stuff. So you can also check newspapers for obits. Check any of what funeral homes were open at the time she would have died also, and see if they have any records online. And Find a Grave's another good place as well.
Yes. Yes, I've checked that.
Yeah, and that's volunteers. So again, some cemeteries are not up yet. And so that just takes time. And if there's a cemetery in your neighborhood, you know what? Go clock it in. They love the volunteers. This is how others get info. And, believe that if you share, you receive, something will come back. Anyone else? Maureen, do you have any questions?
Well, thank you, Dr. Murphy, for taking the time to be with us tonight, and for sharing so many resources and insights. This has really been wonderful.
Good, thank you.
I wanted to let everyone know before we go that we have 3 more genealogy workshops coming up as part of our program here. Dr. Murphy will be back again with us on May 5th for a workshop on African American genealogy challenges. So This is going to be an extended question and answer session. If you're interested in coming back, it's an opportunity to receive one-on-one assistance for additional questions that you have about your family history research. And please let anyone else that you know that would be interested in having this opportunity to have some one-on-one help with research. We'll be sending out a registration link to each of you tomorrow, and we hope you'll all be able to join us again on the 5th. And then on May 17th, Renata Yarborough Sanders will be presenting an introduction to DNA, the who, what, where, and why. And on June 14th, Angela Walton-Raji will be sharing with us about writing one's family narrative. And before you log off, or as you log off, please take a moment to answer the participant survey that you will see on your screen. And thank you again, Dr. Murphy, and thank you to all of you for attending tonight. It was great to have you here.
Thank you. I
you.
will tell you at the workshop, we're going to go through that timeline. So hopefully people will come ready to do some work.
Great.
Harris?
Yes, great.
Okay.
We're
I'll be on
looking forward to
vacation,
it.
so I'll try to make it.
Yeah. Yeah. This is the time we use the tools. We'll analyze those documents, the steps that I covered in tonight's thing about one record creates a record, you know, this, that, and other. That's what we're going to go through on the workshop, just the things I talked about today.
Great.
Okay. I'm going to sign off. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.